items on the agenda today for which we have an interest, if we could declare those at the beginning of the meeting. Item 4 is the public forum, and there were no applications to speak at our public forum today, but there of course is the report on the speakers who came at our meeting in May, and the response from our teams on that. Item 5.1 is the police report, but I see Area Commander Ruth is not in the room at this stage, so we'll continue on to item 6.1, the minutes of our meeting held on Thursday, the 26th of May, and they had a complimentary section, so can I have somebody move both the open and confidential interim record of the proceedings? Councillor Peters is moving, Councillor Hunt is second. Cockerell, I apologise. Are there any corrections or amendments required to those minutes? Well, I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Item 6.2, page 14, the minutes of our meeting held on the 19th of May, including we have confidential, yes we did. Can I send you with their true and quick record? Councillor Cockerell is moving and Councillor Peters is seconding. Any corrections required? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. In INA, e whakapuma ana I ngā menete o tā kātauhi e te wenere I tētahi o ngā rā o Pipiri. Chair. The minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday the 1st of June. Again, can I have somebody move the correct record? Councillor Cockerell is moving, Councillor Peters is seconding. Any corrections required? With that motion, those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. We are tracking along, aren't we? Item 7.1, on page 22, the financial delegation authority requests for approval. So I'm sure we've got Simon ably step forward. So we have recommendations on page 22. That Council approves new financial delegated authority to spend $2,000 to the following roles: the team leader customer experience and team leader PIMS and LIMS, and approving a new financial authority to spend up to $10,000 for the following roles: team leader ICT systems engineering and commercial property advisor. I'll somebody move that recommendation. Councillor Reid is moving, Councillor Peters is seconding. Any discussion? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's another step in streamlining our operation. It's just going to save time in the long run. And I'm sure there are always enough people not to get it wrong.
Any further discussion? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye.
Right.
Against? Carried. Whangarei page 24, item 7.2, the directors on Spring Contractors Limited. The recommendations are that the council remove Rob Corlon from his directorship of Spring Street Contractors and that we appoint Simon Weston as a director of Spring Contractors Limited. So Denny is moving, Councillor Holtz is seconding. Any discussion? No.
Corlon is no longer with us. Logical business as usual.
Any additional comments? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. On page 26, item 7.3, the Marsden Maritime's holding easement, Marsden Cove Marina Services. There are two recommendations. The council pursuant. Oh, who's going to move it? Councillor Cooper is moving it, and Councillor Connor is seconding. Councillor Cooper, would you like to read the motion?
That the council, pursuant to section 48 of the Reserved Act 1977(1), approves the application by Marsden Maritime Holdings for easement rights over lot 804DP 376145 and detailed in the attached easement plan and easement instruction. 2. Authorise the Chief Executive to finalise and execute the easement plan and instruments as agreed with the applicant. Nice and clear. We've discussed it in a workshop more than once, and I think this just follows the direction that the council indicated it would wish to travel in those workshops.
Any further discussion? Councillor Dean.
If there'd been more objection, Your Worship, from the community, I would have been a lot more hesitant to approve this, and I have to say that personally I'm still not particularly happy about it, but it is economic development for the area, provided it's policed as the resource consent sets out, then it should work. If it's not, then it will be a great inconvenience to the people using that reserve, particularly for boat launching and over the summer when it's a particularly crowded area. So I am putting my faith in the fact that it will be monitored to operate as it says within the resource consent. Otherwise I would be voting against.
And likewise, Madam Chair, I actually feel the exact same way, having received several phone calls from the boaties who use those ramps, that it's one of the major concerns that they have down there as well. So I do hope that it is policed properly and it is looked after, because while we need the businesses to keep going, I'm conscious that the boat users who use the ramp also want to have access to the area. So I'm quite conscious of what discussions that might come out over this Christmas time.
Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you, Worship. Just supporting last year's speakers. It's been a bit of a bit, so it's very unusual to actually build a building and then ask for an easement to service it. I went in here on Sunday and had a look at it, and on the weekend it's really jammed out the back of where this easement is. My question is, generally when people apply for an easement, there's a financial contribution as well. And in this case, I can't see it here. So I don't know why council doesn't do that, because I know in my farming life, if someone wanted to put an easement across the property, the first thing you negotiated was a price, because that gives them access to walk across your property. In this case, we're giving them access right to go across our property without any benefit. But what really struck home was, right next door to this is the Coast Guard, and here they are with a barbecue thing, raising funds right next door to this easement. And I thought, how's that fair? So I'd like to know why we are charging a set amount for the easement, but we're giving them a huge amount of benefit. And that's the usual practice. So why is the council doing it?
I'd like to know why that question wasn't asked in July last year.
Well, I've been keep trying to answer that question. I've brought these things up every meeting we've had. It would.
Was that a consideration? Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, it was, but we also managed to get into the easement that they would pay for some of the maintenance of the car park, so we felt that was a acceptable consideration for the easement to go ahead, so that they basically, for the extra use of the trucks through there, that they would be contributing to the maintenance of the surface in there. So that's an ongoing cost rather than the one-off easement payment as well.
Thank you, Worship. Just following on, I feel that the monitoring of the consent conditions is going to be absolutely important. You've got a situation, particularly over the summer period and in the weekends, that boat users will be using the ramp for launching and retrieving. So the conditions ensure that there is a level of management between competing uses. So I think monitoring will be absolutely important. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 7.4, the Water Waste Management Committee Input Users Representation, page 4 code. The recommendations are that, do I have a remover for the recommendations?
Sure, no, I've got a withdraw.
There's noting that he's the chair.
As chair of the Voice Committee.
Council appointed chair, so he's stepping back. So, no removal for recommendations. Councillor Collins is moving. Seconder.
Yes.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Connor, would you like to read out your motion?
Recommends that council appoints Ken Walker, airline representative, Mike Chubb, airport authority representative, and Bernard Russell, airport attendant, to the airport noise management committee, and 2, notes the committee terms of reference that will be updated with the appointments. It's good to have these people on this committee. It's good to have this committee being established to do as much as we can to mitigate what is and could happen in the area. Knowing at least one of these people, and how aware and knowledgeable he is, it's good that we have understanding people on there, and I hope we are able to make a positive move forward and adjust to anything that may need to be dealt with positively.
Any further discussion? Councillors, that will bring us to the required number of people to meet the committee, and the terms of reference will be updated accordingly with the names of those people. So before long we'll have a meeting. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Page 70, item 7.5, the revised terms of reference for the Joint Climate Change Adaptation Committee. Moving for the recommendations on page 70. I'll move the recommendations. Do I have a second? So I'm moving that the council adopts the revised terms of reference for the Joint Climate Change Adaptation Committee as attachment 1, and 2, agrees that the Joint Climate Change Adaptation Committee is not discharged at the local government elections. The description of the reasons for this are pretty clear in the agenda item, and I thank both Sarah and Bernadette for the report that you've given us. This is in line with how other councils who are part of the joint committee are approaching this, and it seems logical to me that we continue with the regulations that all of the councils who are part of the committee have the same standard way of keeping the joint committee continuing on post the elections. Of course, the next council will appoint people to the committee after the results of the election. Any discussion? Councillor Peters.
I'm very excited to see that we are progressing with this, and I feel that it's an essential part of our future development.
That's popular.
Your Worship, with the item, my biggest question comes to item 2 of that, which and I want, maybe you can explain the rationale behind not discharging at the next elections.
Good Chair, so by just we went through a very nice process to try and get the committee to stand up, and it had to go through each council to get nominations, so it was a good six to 9 months to do that. So it was felt that by just enabling the committee to continue and just changing the membership of that committee, and it was still a focus and something that was part of all of our council's work programs, that would continue that work allow that work to continue rather than have to then go back through a set-up process that's going to take time and away from actually doing the work around adaptation.
Okay, so Madam Chair, so just a clarification from my mind, we're not actually discharging we're actually not worrying about the people, it's the actual committee itself, the actual formation. So the committee people will change, just not, that's not. Potentially.
Actually, quite like it, given that the 2 representatives are not standing. Any further debate?
I just want to put, once again, kudos to the staff and across and on the effort that you've put into this work as well, because it's a huge effort, and there's so much that we don't know where we're going to, and just well done once again.
put that motion, those in favour aye. Against, carried. Item 7.6, District Council, on page 78, the offer of land 46 Whangarei District Council. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. So I wish to move the motion A. It confirms it wishes to declare an interest in 46 Cove Road, legally described as Lot 1, DP 172235, and currently used for police housing, should it not be wanted for the Treaty Settlements Land Bank.
Do you have a second for that motion? Councillor Dean, seconding. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. The community is very definitely interested in this property. Should the police wish to get rid of it or move it on, of course, within the community there is a real concern that if the police house goes, it's going to be harder to maintain a police station in Waipu, and I move the motion, but also with the caveat that the community would rather see it stay as an accommodation for policemen. But given that it goes, and being pragmatic, the community is definitely interested in a number of initiatives. All we're asking for today is the ability to have a look at that and declare our interest rather than actually commit. It's just an ability to explore further options for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Having seconded the motion, I haven't been directly approached by the people from Waipu, but I do understand that they have ideas of what could be done with the property, and I think it would be a step backwards to not at least consider the ability for this to be used in the interest of the community. And if we were to take B, declaring no interest in the land, I think that would be wrong, because the community does have an interest in the land, and I think we need to explore that further.
It's great to see how it's been worded as well. I just wanted to highlight on the fact that that as an interest in it, but also acknowledging that if it is needed for the tree building land back, that it's not necessarily taking residence over it. But it's also great to see that, especially in Waipu and the areas, that there's a character in that area, and as it kind of touches on in the agenda, the heritage nature of some of these buildings and areas. It's nice to see the community efforts that have already gone into some of those locations, but also to see them continue. So, long may it continue.
Martin.
I'm really concerned to hear that the police may be leaving Waipu. We had the same issue in the Grand. The local people got stuck in, and we've got 2 police that are doing an outstanding job there, who are doing community police work and not just reactionary once something bad has happened. And I hope this is not going to indicate to the police that the local people are comfortable with not having a policeman in their town, because everyone I've spoken to there is adamant that they desperately need to keep the police there. It's a long way away from where the next lot of police are, and I strongly hope that we can do everything we can to make sure the police stay in Waipu.
Something we can talk to Martin and guys. So I guess I've got a fundamental issue with this. I'm not entirely comfortable that it is appropriate for us to declare an interest. And my concerns come from the analysis of the building. It is, they are scheduled as a Group B scheduled built heritage item already, Site 162, in the Historic Heritage chapter of our plan, and will need to be developed and treated in accordance with the historic heritage provisions. I wonder how limiting that will be for community use, and I guess I am concerned. Well, I appreciate that declaring an interest is not necessarily ending up with the property. The staff recommendation was that we don't declare an interest, and that was their recommendation. And so I'm bowing to the knowledge of the local elected members in that area. I also took particular notice when we received the feedback from the community in their placemaking plan. While there was desire for open space, it didn't come through really strongly to me that they wanted another community facility. It's well serviced with the Celtic barn, the old hall, the glebe. There are many fabulous facilities in Waipō that the community has developed over the years. And I am not entirely convinced that that there's a purpose for this building. I'm concerned that if we were successful in getting the transfer of it, that we would have to purchase it. Could be as high as current day's price of 800,000. Plus, of course, you've then got the ongoing maintenance of it, and because it's a heritage building, those costs will be high. I wonder if the community is aware of that and whether they would be prepared to be contributing. So I guess I accept that the motion is to declare the interest. I also endorse the fact that that treaty settlements land that will take priority. So that in a way is it may not end up that way. So I'm just expressing my concern on behalf of the whole ratepayers for a step when the staff had recognised that there is actually no specific need for such a facility. But it does fit the criteria of the Public Works Act, but they didn't can't. So, Councillor Benny.
In a similar vein, while I respect the local councillors, their wish to do something here, this is what we call on the fly. This is a property that's come up, and we're saying now, we can grab it, we could do something there, rather than identifying what was needed there and looking to purchase something that would be suitable. And so the active sports strategy that we've passed recently talks about hubs, and I think that this is a Waipu, Whangarei, a real opportunities for hubs. And this is not a hub. This is a building in the outskirts. I know the condition of the building. I know the heritage status. There's work required. But one of the reasons the police are getting rid of it because of the ongoing maintenance costs are getting up there, and that's where they're looking to save money. So there's a property that came available across the road probably a few months ago, which in my mind would have been way better proposition for this sort of thing, but we didn't grab that, and I just think it sets a precedent where if a house in Carmel goes for sale, somebody says, "Oh, we could do something there." We've got to look at buying that. So yeah, I'm reluctant to take this further, but yeah, and respect what the staff have said about the state of the building and the heritage and the treaty plants.
Mr. Benny, I apologise. I called you the wrong name.
Oh, it's lucky I can't hear on that. What'd you call me?
Any further debate?
No, I have a question. Is there a requirement that a heritage building stays on that land? Or can a heritage building, and I understand several have been, be moved to a different area, which has happened a number of times with the Waipō Museum? They've actually collected a lot of different buildings which are now in the museum area. And is that the sort of, is that a possibility? Because that's very logical.
I'm not sure if Sue's going to pop in, but I believe that the heritage status sits with the building.
If I could just add, Heritage New Zealand are recommending a heritage covenant is placed on the title, so that might cover more than just the building, and we'd have to get a bit more information about that.
I think you have to cover all the right to reply, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question in relation to the placemaking exercise. Well, what sort of discussion has there been in the placemaking exercise in relation to the property? Do you know?
I'm through the chair. I'm not aware, but I'm not sure if Sue has been part of the closely involved in that.
Through the chair, I reviewed the placemaking plan, and what the community asked for was for more programs and public facilities. So it's assumed that community programs could be delivered through this building.
Thank you.
I completely understand local councillors coming in behind to advocate facilities in their community. I get that completely. And I also understand that things do come up on the fly, you know, and that we have to make a response to them. But I really support what you were saying, Your Worship. I think if we declare an interest to it, just starts us down a certain track. It's quite difficult to get ourselves out of. And if there's the fact I really go often with the staff recommendations. I think they often have done a lot more work than we councillors have at that time. So I'm not comfortable really with council taking it any further.
Councillor Hobbs.
Well, Your Worship, well, I'm going to come out really strong behind the two rebate councillors, and mainly for a different reason. I think even now we're the political leader here, and every time we have a real property come up for sale that goes under scrutiny, and yet we can go out and buy stuff in the middle of the city at whim. And that's over successive council, not just this last one. But the main thing is, if you go to Waipu, you go down the main street, the main car park is half owned by the church. And so we haven't even got enough car parks on the main street. The whole sports field are owned by the Caledonian Society. There's virtually no public space in Waipu. And it's one of our growth nodes. It's the fastest growing residential area per size in the district. So, you know, we've got to look forward. We're only looking at it, because this is not a sale and purchase agreement. It's to look and do an investigation. And we would not be doing our job as governors if we left and don't sharpen up and have a look at options. Thank you.
Can I make a point of order, please? Just the statement that Councillor Hoss has just made about going out on a whim for the council. The council staff do a lot of stuff in behind, and I don't think that comment was appropriate.
Yeah, Councillor Conniff has raised a point that Councillor Hoss talked about going up on a whim, and I support his point of order that this is definitely being researched, and this is not the sort of thing that, so just a caution around the inference that we are doing things on a whim. Councillor Peters.
I support showing an interest in this property, because it doesn't mean that you're buying it, and down the line, if you signal that, you may actually support a local group to purchase it and not own it themselves. The council doesn't necessarily have to buy it and own it, but the support of the council for a local group, and I hear that there's local support for this, and that's the reason which I support it.
So can I ask a question on process, because I'm just checking that if the council did declare an interest in the property and we were successful, are we able to then forward that on to others, or from a process perspective, can you help us with that?
Through the chair, I think we could do something. It might be that council originally purchases it and then maybe on-sells it to the community organisation.
Are you absolutely confident that in the Public Works Act?
No, I couldn't be absolutely confident, but it's a question on the fly. As long as it's still held for a public work, that will be the issue. And if we purchase it for a certain public work in the beginning, it's got to be held for that public work. And if we want to on-sell it, we would need ourselves to go through the Public Works Act. So I can see that we could navigate our way through that if we would continue to hold it for the same type of public work that we acquired it for, or the new group did.
Thank you, Sue. That's a good idea.
Can I just ask you a question? Obviously, this is police housing, it's like appropriate money's just went to the door. But I'm assuming that there's no police living in there at the moment.
There is.
There is.
There's a policeman.
Can we, Sue, can you clarify the current situation, please?
I've got no, through the chair, I've got no idea if it's occupied or not. All I know is that the property group are starting the process to divest the land.
Thank you.
There is Constable Geddes lives there.
So if Constable Geddes lives there, and he's no longer going to be living there, where's he going? I'm assuming he's just renting somewhere, so there's still going to be a policeman in Waipō.
We can perhaps ask that when we had the representative. No, it's not going to be. That is. Marty? Councillors, stick with the issue at hand. It is whether or not we are expressing an interest under the Public Works Act for a property in Waipō. Councillor Reid.
Playing around with the English language here, and I'm just wondering whether perhaps we modify the proposal to without prejudice or commitment to purchase, and that just clarifies that we are declaring an interest, but we're not necessarily going to buy, and it's out there for the public.
You like a little bit pregnant.
Yeah.
I think, we are dealing with the Public Works Act. Simon, are you able to give some clarity on this? So this is actually a...
We can declare an interest, doesn't mean to say we have to.
Sorry?
We can declare an interest, that doesn't mean to say we have to.
Yeah. Any further debate?
I guess my question then, Simon, is if we declare an interest, why are we declaring an interest if we would not be interested in buying?
Well, following due diligence, you may find that it's not suitable for what you wanted it for. You may find that the price that you've been asked for is right too expensive. So there are reasons why we wouldn't go ahead.
That's a question, I think. I then think it's a bit of a, to me, it sort of feels like a bit of a no-brainer. Like, why would we not? That's just my opinion. Why would we, I mean, we're not buying it, we just want to declare an interest because we might, or we don't know. I'm really uncomfortable chucking a policeman out. So I support that.
Any further debate? Councillor Peavy, you're right as well.
Thank you very much. So recently there has been the placemaking plan, the consultation on the placemaking plan. We heard that the public, through those consultations, have expressed a desire to have more public or more community service area for more community services. I know through that consultation that the public have also expressed a desire to preserve the character and of the village and the heritage value of the village. So all of those things take account of the fact that that house holds a special place in the history of Waipō. There's been concerns raised about whether or not the council will be saddled with a property that then has to pay a whole lot of money for, and people are considering which way to vote based on that, without giving the community a chance, and we must give the community a chance to come to the council and put its case and say what they wish to use it for and how they wish to sort of mitigate the risk to the council. Now that is quite a reasonable thing for the community to be given that opportunity. It is not about a sporting, extra sporting facility and therefore not part of a hub. It is actually about providing the community with a facility that it has identified and at the same time protecting its heritage and its character. And all we're asking, all the community, and it is very strongly asking for the opportunity to present its case, do its due diligence, and then let the cards fall where they fall. If you cut it off now, you are denying a community a chance to have a go, to help itself and to make itself improve itself. And Waipu does that very well, and that is why there isn't many council facilities in Waipu, and that is why there isn't a lot of council money required to run Waipu. They only want the chance to do the same thing again. Thank you.
Right, the placement. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against?
I'll abstain.
Carried. That brings us back to item 5.1, the police report. Very warm welcome to Mark, and your timing is impeccable. You can tell us about this.
I could see the dollar signs.
Morena, everyone. Pleasure to be here again before you and your worship. Councillors and members of the public. I know how much precious your time is, so I'll be as brief as I can. Probably since we spoke last, the biggest movement in terms of our community concern would be youth. Without a shadow of a doubt, that's popping up in a number of places. Truancy is probably at levels we haven't seen before. Youth crime is impacting on our citizens, our communities, probably in a level you've never seen before. In terms of taking cars for joyrides, call it what you like, and taking social media influences on that huge. It's like a Gran Turismo on steroids. It's a competition who can post the best wheelie, the best ram raid. So there's a significant drain on resources of the police here in Whangarei, Kaipara, but we're doing very, very well. We're sitting on top of youth offenders who are probably approaching 20 or 30 cars plus. And of course the impact on the victims is huge. So yeah, we've got to strengthen our partnerships with OT and a few other organisations around what we're doing and what we can do with these young people. That's probably the most significant increase or change or variance since I spoke to you last and what's happening in the world of policing. Other than that, a couple of interesting little jobs we did with MB. We seized $1.9 million cash yesterday in conjunction with them. The last couple of days in relation to some businesses operating here in Whangarei. Can't tell you any more than that. Yeah, our violent crime is touchable. It's in a good space. Had one more shooting in Tama since I spoke to you last, which was a drive-by with the rest of it. 501 from Australia for that. Most of his family were arrested as a result of that. Or as it was tied up for 2 days. Other than that, pretty much business as usual. So nothing big, just a time for strengthening our partnerships as we spiral out of COVID, over 2 years of COVID. You'll see it with your communities, anxiety levels are up there, people's behaviour is a little bit different, less tolerant, and yeah, we've just got to come together in our groups to solve some of these problems. They're not big problems, we've all been there before, so it's nothing that we can't handle. Any questions?
Tony, could you also just give us a bit of background into the motorbikes and things?
Well, sure. Yeah, so great work there by the Raumanga community, and we've seen recently the meeting we had there, chaired by our local MP. That was productive, but one of our teams, we get a multi-faceted approach to that. One was some let's get some wins on the board with some low-hanging fruit. You've seen that. There's some long-term solutions with road policing and some partnerships there, but the low-hanging fruit worked very well. Some of the investigation teams there got some great intelligence from that community in terms of what was going on. And the road bikes was largely, can I say, largely run by youth gangs affiliated with bigger OMCG gangs. We seized 9 bikes, quad and 8 bikes, and we're applying for a call for those to be forfeited to the Crown based on the
behaviour. There was some ancillary arrests for drug dealing, cash, and bits and pieces that we seized in the online community. So some quick wins there. Probably very, very popular, that tip of the sword stuff that particularly with the community there, they were very happy with what we've achieved there so far, but there's still a way to go. There's some other little groups popping up around the community that you'll see in here. Further north, it's also quite problematic in some of the smaller towns. Yeah, so there's still some work to do, but certainly probably the core 80% of the problem bikers can be bikes removed. For those 54, the basis that they're causing community harm, community offences.
Thanks, Marty. Councillor Cockerill.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Marty, with a lot of the break-ins with the cars and things like that, we know there's a lot of victims. How are the police dealing with victim support in relation to making sure those people actually get looked after and dealt with in the same respectful way?
Yes, I'd probably give you an answer there, but we've had one night where we've had as many as 30 cars taken over. That's just in sort of Whangarei City. That was a very busy night for our youth gangs out there, posting little joyrides and what they get up to on different social media platforms. We've done a whole lot of prevention work around those particular models of car, the Nissan Tiga, Aqua, and not being rude if anyone's got one of those cars. I'm not saying anything, but there are some bottom end models that you can break into a pipe wrench and a screwdriver. You're moving in less than a minute and a half. It's just that easy. So the manufacturers of those bottom end vehicles really help to account because they're just too easy to steal. So yeah, we've done some work with our prevention teams around makes, models, what to do, where to take the car, steering box, and bits and pieces. But we were surprised how the public are quite different. It's not going to happen to me. So I've lost count of the amount of stolen cars we've recovered, forensically examined. It's starting to drop off again as we target real hardened young people who are doing this every night for fun.
So when it comes to the victim support, you're going out talking to people about the safety of the vehicles, but what about the actual people who actually are victims? Because there's going to be a lot of emotional stress on their side of things as well.
Yep. Look, everyone, I can't say in hand on my heart, everyone, but every car is forensically examined for the road that is stolen. Every victim should get a phone call. It's a confidential advice, and it's just a standard response for us in terms of further victimisation and what can be done. Just obviously communication around that with the car. So yeah, it can range from 13, 12 cars a night when we have a spike.
Yep.
It's just in Whangarei City alone. So I'm very confident.
And one other question, which is more in relation to graffiti and prosecuting and things like that. Previously, there was a lot of prosecuting in relation to graffiti. Is that still happening or not?
I would have to say no. So it's just not coming up on our radar. Like I said in the last meeting, it's not been reported to us. It's not that we can't do that, but we've sort of jumped another level now. I'm not saying that's not important, but all our resources are going to people in serious property offences. The team to put on the video and do it.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you very much for your work in Romana. Definitely was a lot quieter when we were up there on the weekend. Well done. I'm interested to hear if you'd be interested in collaborating with a group in Whangarei around young people who are hanging about. There is a group starting to coalesce there with a bit of support, but probably could use more support.
Absolutely, Councillor Peters. We've partnered a lot of agencies, privately funded, etc. We've got some big youth teams there here in Whangarei. Te Oroho, and just to mention one of them, obviously Blue Light, our youth teams are running all sorts of programs through driver's license and applying for funding for that to help youth get away from that entry point into the justice system. If you send me an email, give me a call, I'm happy to engage with.
It's Debbie Prasad. Debbie from the marae there.
Right.
So she's got a group of about 15 of them.
Yep.
Tries to keep them busy during the day rather than.
Yep.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for coming in again, Marty. Reporting of bad driving incidents. I was doing a bit of driver training on Monday morning, extremely early, and it would have been just prior to daylight, at 20 to 7, coming back through the Weekly Valley. Now, we've had a fatal there not so long back with an impatient driver passing a loaded log truck and slamming into a vehicle going the other way. We nearly had one on Monday morning as well. Thankfully, my driver's pretty astute and could see what was happening. We braked heavily and I could see the fence on the left-hand side approaching. And the vehicle coming the other way was onto it as well, and the guy managed to get through, but couldn't see the roof of the vehicle when he went past us. That's how close he was. And I got the registration. It's no use ringing from where we work because the reception's pretty cruddy. So it would have been 20 minutes later when I got back into Mona Perry and we stopped just to have a bit of a chat about what had happened. I rang the report line and was told, yep, they gave me the rundown on it. They identified the make of the vehicle and the colour, which I couldn't do because it was wet and a little bit foggy and the road was wet. And I did get the registration number, I was pretty focused on that. And she says, you can either go into the police station and report it, and I was coming in for a meeting anyway for another reason. And I thought, I'll duck into the police station then, rather than go online, because it's easier for me. I don't like computers very much. And I got there about 10 to 8 or quarter to 8. Door's not open until 8 o'clock, and I stuff it, so I just threw it in. The whole idea was going out the door right then, and I carried on for the day. My question is, can we streamline or make it easier for the likes of old farts like me who doesn't like computers to get people reports in? Because I want that guy nailed.
Yep. So the best way to report traffic stuff and get a response, and there's a bit of a story here, is star 555 at the time. So it'd probably be fair to say the last 2 years that a lot of the road policing resources have been sucked into checkpoints, COVID response. I can tell you now that nationally the key strategic priority 1 to 3 is getting road policing back into doing what road policing should be doing. They have been awesome in supporting the front line through the last couple of years, but that's a space we had to be in. Now that we're sort of coming out of COVID, they're going back to their core duties, and you'll see the results of that. If you haven't seen them already, a number of EBAs, breath and alcohol tests, and people unfortunately that have migrated back to drink driving all the time. They're getting some incredible numbers out there at the moment for drink driving. And they're doing more time on the highways, they're getting the numbers out there, and they're largely being able to learn their core duties. The best advice I can give you is star 555. feel if that flashes across, if there's something urgent, all units will get a broadcast straight away. We'll try and pick up that car straight away. In respect to the station, we've reduced our hours during COVID. Whether we stay that way is yet to be determined, but we're open 24/7 there at Whangarei. The best bang for buck for the public is to get our people out on the road. You get a call by dialing 111. It's the best way to get a policeman. But yeah, just the hours of the police station have been trimmed back a bit. That's a national response to COVID. So the best way to get police services is to phone. But Star 555 works well.
That's what I did use, but it was just
good to get through.
This wasn't happening right at the time.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit more focused because my driver was a bit shaken by that. They didn't understand. And I realised that there's a hell of a lot more bad drivers than there are police, and you can't be everywhere all the time. So.
Yeah, look, it's funny how attitudes and people's behaviour changes. You know, it's just in the time that the road policing hadn't been in the space they used to be, how quickly things slip back. You know, you've seen some pretty bad behaviour returning very, very quickly. But it's not going to be long before it gets back to normal. What the new normal looks like, we don't really know.
Mr. Benny.
A couple of things, thank you, Mr. Ruth. Firstly, what are you doing at Waipu? Why are you selling the house?
Good question, Henry. So yeah, there's a bit of a story here. I'm not sure we've got time.
Give us a short version.
Here we do.
Okay. So look, be assured the Waipu police station is not closing. We've got an ageing police housing spectrum across the whole of Northland, and this is not just happening here in Northland. A lot of our police houses are getting on, so we're at the stage where a lot of those places were hard to fill. So Waipu was one. A lot of the ones up north are the same. Kaipu, we've got seven police houses over there. And yeah, people don't want to. Our new cops aren't necessarily attracted to them. And take Waipu, for instance, when the current constable went in there many years ago, it was a hard to fill station. We don't have any problems getting people want to transfer to Waipu or Ruakaka or Green Bay now. So that's jumping at the opportunity to go there. It's that sort of semi-rural policing, they like the community side of it. So the house is old. I've heard a little bit about what's going on at the moment, so I don't think the final decision's been made yet, but I know that the house at Waipu is very, very, very old. Got some big problems.
Cool, please, that was the short version.
Yeah.
So the second thing is that the youth issues, and particularly around here, we've had quite a bit happening around here, and you talk about strengthening relationships. So the role of the truancy officer, is there somebody doing the truancy? So we're talking about Boys High in particular, are we, with the youth stuff around the truants?
Well, okay, so truancy is owned by MOE. There's a contract there. It's probably not right that I say anything further about how that's been serviced or run.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, but so I talked to Sergeant Paul Nicholas at Karma,
yep.
And he said they've got it all together. They're working together to sort those issues out. So are you comfortable that or is there some level of comfort for us that we're working with those groups to try and better it all?
Well, I think we can't own it on ourselves. Everyone's got MOE got to step up. Police can always do more, as we do. But there are a lot of other agencies and community groups that need to step up in this space. It's not a problem that we can do on that. We can solve on our own. And you see that coming up COVID. There's a lot of old problems re-emerging that we haven't been looking at for a while. It's part of what our youth problem is.
Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Any further questions for Martin?
Marty, can I acknowledge your, the constable from Whangarei who was at the Matariki this morning? Very nice, Sam. He got called Spencer regularly. He said, no, I'm not Spencer, I'm Sam.
Yeah.
So really nice to see him and have a chat with him. He said he's looking forward to being able to be connected with the community and the team. So my thanks to him for being here.
Thank you.
Councillor Poplar, did you have any?
Yeah, I was just going to hand on the same sort of thing, but it was about actually all constables, seeing them amongst the community. Yeah, that's really well respected, and it's really good to see them out there and out and about. So yeah, I think that needs to be taken back to them and say, no, keep up the good work, keep doing that, because it's the community. They feel, I don't want to say safer, but they feel more reassured when they see a police officer around.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Marty. Oh, Marty, just before you go, but
reminded me of Spencer comment. The reason that Spencer is so well known in Whangarei is he's been there and around for, I see it posted recently out on Facebook, that he's retiring after 41 years. So he has been an epic and great supporter, especially in those areas where people fear to tread, per se. And so the biggest kudos to him. So if you can pass that on, I haven't seen him for a while, but I know there is a sadness within the community to see him going, and his name holds real reverence, even though it's maybe not seen as often. So it's a big kudos to him.
Thank you. I'll make sure that's passed on.
thanks again, Marty. I need somebody to move the recommendation that Councillor Noakes will report.
Yeah.
Councillor everybody, Councillor Martin, Councillor Regan, those in favour aye, against, carried. And I am whārangi wari te kaumārua, 82, item 7.7, and Councillor Poplar is on speaker.
Yes, I am, Your Worship. I would like to move a different motion, which you've now got in front of you. And the motion is, again, entitled 7.7 Better Off Funding Tranche 1 Application. Would you like me to read it through, Your Worship?
Absolutely.
Okay. The proposed recommendation is that Council 1 notes the Department of Internal Affairs clarification regarding acceptance of the Better Off funding for those councils who oppose the Three Water reform. And in italics there is the section which is from their document. And 2, that we do not apply for the Three Waters Reform Better Off Package Tranche 1 funding.
Do we have a second of that motion? So we go lightly, second.
And I'll keep going on that. Your Worship, I want to acknowledge the hard work of our staff going through things and getting things together, but I also want to acknowledge that at this present moment, our council has made a stance that has been quite strongly supported by our community, that we will not be part of the Three Waters reform. Your Worship, we've also gone out there and actually gone through the process of taking the government to court about who owns the water and who owns the assets, should I say. And this is all part of the reason why I'm saying we should not support any application. Especially when, and I know councillors, you've read the documents, you've gone through it, but when you see an item in there which says, and I'll rephrase it to 2.10 in the general clause of the contract, which says, if you take this money, but then try to oppose what we've done, we're going to take this money back. I acknowledge, Your Worship and councillors, that in item 1 there, it quite clearly says the government has said, oh, you could ignore that. So how much of the other contract do we ignore? Your Worship, I feel from a moral stance that we need to stand up for our community. We need to be very clear in the actions that we're going forward. If we are opposing the government, we should say we are opposing all of the government with all of the proposal on this proposal. We shouldn't turn around and go, I will take this apple from here and we'll take this pear from here. We should actually be turning around and saying, we disagree, we do not accept. Yes, I know some of you may feel this is cutting your nose off to spite your face, as the terminology is used. I realise that, I understand that. However, councillors, I have a moral obligation. And when I turned around and said, I am there to represent my community and to represent my people, the residents of Whangarei, and they turn around and say to me, we want you to oppose the Three Waters. Morally, I have to oppose this because this is just conflicting me immensely by saying that if I approved an application. Councillors, I also want to remind you, back when we first had the proposal put to us by DIA, where we accepted some funding from the government, within months, they turned around and said, no, you no longer can opt out. Within months. When previously they said, yes, you can opt out. So I remind you of that. This government, at this present moment, does not fill me with trust about the Three Waters. It does not fill me with protection for my residents' assets. So while there is a carrot there for 9.5 roughly million, on our total asset base of over $1.4 billion, I am very uncomfortable. So I have moved this motion to say, no central government, no DIA, we do not want a part of this because we do not, at this present moment, trust what you're putting in front of us. And again, Your Worship, I questioned, councillors, I questioned the staff about whether we could have 2.10 removed from the document. And they tell us, no, we can't remove it from the document because DIO won't accept it. But they're happy to send a letter out to us to say ignore it. This morning, I was at Marareki with the others, and then I had to go to a business meeting. And amongst a whole pile of business people, I asked them a question. I said, you know, are you happy with the way the council has opposed the Three Waters things? And every single one of them said yes. Every single one of them. Then I turned around and said, okay, well, what if the government offered you 9.8 million to say, you know, how well you're doing things and would you accept it? Without telling them about the clauses, they all turned around and said no. And it was, again, it is a trust thing. Right now, under the Three Water proposals, under the whole banner there, our community does not trust the government, does not trust DIA. So if we go down the process of doing an application, what is the next step that will happen? Will they turn around and say, oh yeah, you've accepted that, brilliant, okay, right, you're now agreeing to all our information, all our clauses, you're now agreeing to everything. So councillors, I want you to think about this. I want you to go through each one of your minds and actually consider in your hearts, what is the best thing for our community? Because right now, and with myself, morally, I do not feel comfortable in supporting something which is basically, in turn, could be selling away our assets. So that is why I have proposed us to not apply for the Three Waters Better Off package, tranche 1. And I hope, councillors, that you also support me on that in relation to our community.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm just going to make this sort of fairly brief because obviously I seconded the motion, so I am completely 100% behind Councillor Coccarello here. I think
from when this first came about, you know, we were all, as far as I'm aware, we were all really uncomfortable with the sort of carrots that were dangling. And I just, from hearing from ratepayers, and you hear all the stuff on social media, there's so much stuff about the string orders that we've all seen and heard. Not one single thing have I read anywhere that say no, but take the $9 million. It's just not there. Our ratepayers would think we're just weak, and so I'm sorry, but it's just, I can't. I mean, I support Councillor Coccarello's recommendation, and I think that we are making a really strong stand here. And then to turn around and say, oh, but we'll take your money. It's just, ever since this came about, I've always thought, no, I don't like it. It's just not right for me. So I'm not going to. I'll be supporting Councillor Coccarello's recommendation. Thank you.
That's really nice.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to give notice that if this motion fails, that I'll be moving the recommendation that we have on page 82. I see that, and I'll be extremely brief because hopefully I'll be able to speak to the motion that I'll be able to move. But, it's not as if we are against the community in terms of the views expressed. We have a situation where council is in a position that it has placed its two waters, I've better use two waters, potable and also wastewater as a high priority. We are an exception. Elsewhere within New Zealand, that hasn't been the case. So here we are as an exception, and we found that before when we were looking at Provincial Growth Fund applications as well, because we're well planned. It worked against us because you couldn't get a PGF if a project was in our long-term plan. So it actually reinforced bad planning. Or should I say, lack of planning. So I see that we are an exception. I'm here to look after the ratepayer. I'm not here to play with rhetoric in the council chamber. So I'll leave it at that, Your Worship.
That's fantastic.
Yes, please. I oppose Councillor Coccarello's motion. And I do note that we have taken a position. That has not changed. That's progressing. However, we can take this money and we don't know where it's going in the end. That's the other side. We don't know where we're going to get to. But this money is targeted towards issues that are really important in our community. It's targeted towards housing, it's targeted towards environmental issues, and it's targeted towards climate action. So in fact, it's all things that we need to be working on. It does not compromise, taking the money does not compromise our position in court. I believe we should continue to take the money.
Thank you, Worship. This thing really get in the council chamber, and you see the terms in what we're talking about here. One of the reasons why I actually support Councillor Coccarello at the moment at this point is because the public outside have had little information fed to them. I, like Councillor Coccarello, has said every meeting I've attended recently, have asked the public what they thought about our stance, and they're right behind us, and have the Maori contingent of our Takata area behind us. That's a big step, and we've got to take notice of that. So we're elected to represent the wider view and to take aboard some of the political statements that are made. I think the present government lost all credibility when they said we could opt out and then mandated it out. They lost their credibility. But I do not like the inference that we've got in our agenda here in their statement. It says For the avoidance of doubt, publicly criticised or expressing opinions on reform cannot reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the reputation, good standing or goodwill of the Department of New Zealand government. Well, guess who crushed that? They crushed that themselves when they mandated over top of our opted out proposal. We went into everything on a really open eyes basis. I think there's no New Zealander would vote against having good water. I don't think there's one New Zealander who doesn't think some kind of reform is needed. But to be given options by a government and then being trumped out has led us to take court action. We've signalled and been a leader in New Zealand. I want to be a councillor in a council who continues to be a leader in New Zealand. It's interesting, generally when you have a court case against anyone, this would be sub judice. Why are we discussing this? Agenda item when we actually got legal thing against the government. Maybe a question should be asked to our general manager. So we haven't got an answer from that. We're not likely to get an answer because this government plays a long game. They will not give us an answer until after the election. But all the way through, and as pointed out in the clause, it says if you take the money, you cannot criticise and make comment. Well, gee, how bad is that? You know, anyone's right to actually say anything they like, freedom of speech. I know they're trying to tighten them up a bit, say you haven't got freedom of speech, but at the moment we still have, and we want to continue to make sure we're really keen on that. But so going back to the fundamental things, we have support of our community. We've got really good infrastructure in place, and the council's overpassed. This council should be really taking a pat on the back for how well we've managed our water things up to date. And we should continue to push to be a leader, but to be individuals in the sense that there are people outside of Wellington that do know something. And it's very, very disappointing that we've offered suggestions that haven't been uplifted from the government. The way to work together. We've actually signalled how we could actually overcome a lot of the hurdles, and we've also signalled that when you actually got someone who's doing something, wouldn't it be good to ask the question, how did you do that? We'd like to tag along with that. Can we implement that into our thinking? Those questions is the ones the government continually ignores. And if they're taken out of board, they'd have us supporting them right through this reform, they'd have us in the top performers would be leading the discussion. But they've trumped us all with that mandate to you out. We know best, and I think that's not the way to go at the moment. So I'm going to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillors, I will not be supporting the motion. I do completely understand the concept of sending a clear message that we are not part of the Three Waters reform package. And we are doing that on the issue of the proceedings in court against the Crown. It is about ownership and property rights. It's not about funding and whether we accept applying for a better off funding tranche. So I won't be supporting it, and I do look forward to be able to support the motion that's been indicated by Councillor Innes that we do apply. There are reasons for this. The risks have been outlined on page 88 of our agenda. Our staff have said that there is little risk attached to accepting the tranche one funding. That doesn't say there's no risk. Of course, we accept that there is a small risk. However, there are many councils in the same position who are expressing their pushback against the reform packages as they are, much like we are. The other risk was if we don't apply for this because of if we don't apply now, it's said that it will be more difficult to spend all of the nearly $38 million federal funding within the remaining 3 years. It's separated into two tranches. The second tranche may not be applicable at all because if the Water Services Entity Bill is overturned by events in the future, then the second part, the tranche 2 funding, is gone forever. So for me, I do think that for the benefit of our ratepayers I am going to support an application for tranche 1 because that is certain. The risk of tranche 2 is a higher risk, and that may well not eventuate at all. So on behalf of our ratepayers, I do believe we should follow through this process of applying for the tranche 1 application. It's 9.8 plus GST, and that's not to be sneezed at, 9.48. And there may well be projects that we proceed with in our community in partnership that would otherwise not be able to proceed. So I am really supportive of taking the opportunity to apply. It may be that our applications fail through Crown Infrastructure Partners, but it's like expressing interest in the Public Works Act. If you're not there, you're not going to have the opportunity to receive that funding for our ratepayers. So I cannot support the original motion. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, so well, I'm really happy with the principle of Councillor Coccarello's recommendation. I agree with you completely. I just think that we talk about what is best for the ratepayers, and the ratepayers, I think, are unanimous with the council in that we are opposed to the way this process is going about. And it's the process of what they're doing and how they're doing it that we're opposed to. And I think we've shown that opposition, and I think we'll continue to show the opposition. The second paragraph on page 86 says, signing up to the tranche 1 funding while not compromising the ability of council to oppose, submit or negotiate on reforms to achieve the best outcomes on the day. As mentioned previously, we missed out big time on the shovel-ready projects, on the PGF funding. We talk about 9.48 million like it's nothing. We sit here and argue for hours about grants of $2,000 to community organisations. This is the opportunity for 9.48 million towards some real community wellbeing projects. I don't think it is the smartest decision to say that we are backing the ratepayers, but we're turning down that funding. So therefore, I cannot vote for Councillor Coccarello's recommendation.
I also, as Councillor Benny, won't be supporting the Councillor Coccarello's recommendation. I just want to read something that he missed out of the recommendation that he read, which is the quote from Internal Affairs in terms of the clarification about the funding. The funding agreement for the Better Off package does not prevent or prohibit councils from doing this, i.e. opposing the Three Waters reform. The avoidance of doubt, publicly criticising or expressing opinions on reform cannot reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the standing, reputation, good standing or goodwill of the Department for New Zealand Government, and would not represent a breach of the funding agreement. When this money appeared, I think a number of us who are vehemently opposed to the reforms did refer back to the mandating process, and I think the committees for local democracy or whatever really checked very carefully about whether if we took this money it was effectively a bribe and you were buying into the whole process. So I thought that part of the recommendation in terms of what DIA has said was really important. And I know I checked also with you, Your Worship, again, if we take this money, are we likely in the future to be pulled into it? And I note just the letter from Internal Affairs to the Chair of the Communities for Local Democracy, where again it says, the Department wrote to all Chief Executives on the 20th of May 2022, acknowledging the importance of councils being able to independently express their views of the reform program, and the funding agreement for the Better Off package does not preclude councils from doing this. I also just want to check, just clarify the point 210 in the funding agreement, because it doesn't say that we can't propose. It doesn't say we're going to be stifled or our voices are going to be whatever Councillor Horst is referring to. It says we must not at any time do anything. that could reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the reputation, good standing, or goodwill of DIA or the New Zealand government. It doesn't say we can't publicly criticise, it doesn't say we can't advocate our position, it doesn't say we have to go along with reforms. So because of those, I don't know, prerequisites, if you like, I'm quite comfortable with going ahead and taking money from the government that is not going to then bind us to some situation. I don't think that, I think it's different from the in-out process where basically that was fudged. It was fudged. This is a very clear steer that we're able to continue our position, we're able to continue to criticise the government and say what we would like to see better, but also take some money that, as Councillor Peters said, has some very opens up some real possibilities for this council to do a number of small number of large projects well for the well-being of our community. And I can think of a number. Gosh, I'm sitting in this room already thinking of a project that could be part of that. I was at a place last night where I think, gosh, it would be great if we could help this project continue. There are other projects where I think that we could usefully take the money that the government is offering without doing anything to compromise our position and our opposition to the current government's food rules reform. So I will not be supporting Councillor Pecoraro, and I will be supporting, hopefully, the original amendment later.
Just point of order, please. Yeah, Councillor Cuthbertson was quoting some comments referred to a comment that I've made. I'd referred my mate, and as Councillor Cuthbert know, I actually do a bit of homework and make sure I quote the right things correctly. Quite correctly, in 2.2, Councillor Cuthbert said that they do not require this. Councillor, in clause 2.10, quite clearly, the recipient must not at any time do anything that could reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the reputation, good standing or goodwill of DIA or New Zealand government. The recipient must keep DIA informed of any matter known to the recipient but could reasonably be expected to have the effect. That's quite clear. Thank you.
So what was your
well, she's referred to my quote was not correct. Its text is correct and it's actually in the document.
I think Councillor Cuthbert was making a point that your interpretation may differ from hers, and that's very common. So I don't think there is a point of view.
I think you base it on fact.
What's the dean?
And the interpretation of that comment being different brings me to the point that is really confusing me with this item. I have to say that my faith in anything that comes out of the government, and there's every chance that that is being derogatory to the government, but it is my personal opinion, has no credibility. You have no way of knowing that what they're saying today is going to be what they put in place tomorrow. And that's the problem that I have with this. Yeah, I totally support accepting $9 million from the government, assuming that that doesn't compromise our position to carry on rejecting this proposal. Because in my mind, to take local democracy out of the public's ability to manage its own assets is wrong. I mean, I totally support what Councillor Hull said, but why didn't the government ask the councils that have actually managed their infrastructure well, and we have demonstrably done that well, right from acquiring the Wilson's Dam forward, councils, one after the other, have made really good decisions in this area on behalf of their ratepayers. So why would we now jeopardise our ratepayers being able to continue in that vein, to look after their own assets? So why would a responsible, respected government not take on board the information and the procedure that's gone on in a council that has the ability to look after its own assets? Why should we be dragged down to the common denominator of those who have spent their money on a lot of wonderful assets that we have gone without in order to be able to maintain our basic assets, which is what our community, I've been here for what, 18 years, and all the time I've been here, that is what our community has said. Deal with the basics first. If there's anything left, then yeah, we'd love some really good facilities. And we have, to the best of our ability, and previous councils as well, have done that. And now, this government is penalising us for having been prudent, financially responsible, and looking after our assets to the best of our ability. And I have absolutely, my faith in this government sticking to what it has said is totally undermined. I have no faith. And that is why I'm absolutely torn in two with this item. Because I don't want to give this government any reason to suspect that we support their Three Waters proposal. On the other hand, I don't want our community to miss out on fundings. It appears we're going to be forced down this track, whether we like it or not. And I also want our community to be able to get the best possible advantage from it. And the only advantage they're going to get from it is in whatever money this government decides is appropriate for us to have. So, on those grounds, I have no idea whether we should actually turn down this 9 million or not.
Ka ora te wai, ka ora te whenua, ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. If the water is healthy, the land will be nourished. If the land is nourished, people will be provided for. My values here are to the people, the environment, and to the water. I personally do not like the whole situation we've been going through. I do not like the way the central government have presented it. I also don't really like the way that we are going about it either. Whilst I don't agree with any of these ways, I want to make sure that the people who do support it are heard from too, because there are many communities in our district, in Titaitokura. There are many communities. It's not one community. We have different ones. And if we say one community, it may just mean a circle here. It may be a circle over here. District, encapsulate, and further afield. I don't want to see other districts have unhealthy water. I don't want to see other districts have people dying from situations where they're unable to do it. I also don't want to see our district, after one storm, have sewage popping out of drain pipes that we have recently had complaints about. We still have, whilst we are really good, we are not perfect. I've raised this question before, and there are, I don't have the statistics on me, sorry, but there is a lot of infrastructure that we do need to replace, and we do need to get finished. And we are not perfect. Funding is needed in so many places around the district. Obviously, rates are where we are able to provide for a lot of these things, but so often we apply to central government for funding for so many projects. We wouldn't be able to get half of the roading budget done with it. And I've also heard that we need, whilst it's not that on here, 4 times the roading budget to be able to do everything up to perfect standard. That one I can roll off the top of my head because I remember that one. But we're always applying for these fundings. So I think we really need to, whilst we have this opportunity to be able to utilize something, to be able to bring it in and utilize it in spaces that we do need it. The potential for the funding, whilst maybe not specifically here done at the moment, but there's potential to work within the housing strategy, there's potential to work within the Whangarei swamp and the issues that are surrounding that. And that even crosses from our district all the way into Kaipara and out into that harbor, which is one of those things that you don't think a creek up here goes the whole way across the country. These water isn't bound by these, whilst we have arbitrary lines dividing us up, and let alone Hapu and Iwi have different lines
in their spaces as well. So I don't support this way, I will support the other way. I accept the way that the council has gone about, but I also need to ensure that there are those people out there who may not have their voices heard, who do support the way we've gone forward, to be heard. And that, to me, is much more important than having a unanimous decision, ensuring that people are heard.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Your Worship. Torn a little bit, but we're talking about taking 9.something million and we can do this lovely project and that lovely project, and then we may get some more. I just suspect that it's going to be mandated anyway. If you decide to take the 9.8 million or whatever, I would recommend that you put it in the bank and they will lock it up. Because if they mandate on this, we won't get any money for our infrastructure and we're going to struggle to get a penny to fix any pipe work. So, yeah. I'm kind of leaning towards Councillor Cockerell's motion at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I'd like to apologise to Councillor Cockerell. I was in the chamber when he started his oratory on the motion, but I heard most of it. Thank you. There's a lot being said, and there's a lot. We have strayed into territory, I believe, which is beyond our control, and I think one of our jobs is to look at the situation and evaluate what we have control over and what we don't. And at a time when we are looking at some of the highest inflation since, I, back in the 80s when Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson had a go, and we're heading for a recession, and some of those nice to have things are going to be very hard to fund because we're going to be struggling to do the basics as we look forward. To turn down $9.48 million when we have assessed the risks, the staff have assessed the risks of us taking it. The council has very successfully and strongly voiced its opposition to these three waters. And so I do not think that has been missed by the government. I think everybody's very clear about where we stand, but I think we do have a duty to our ratepayers to get the absolute best deal that we can in these times, and I'm not prepared to give up 9.48 million for a little gain.
Any further debate? Councillor Cora, would you like your right of reply now or after?
No, Your Worship, I'll have my right of reply now. I have no problem with that. And I'll stand as well, so make it easier. Your Worship, there's been a few comments made, and I need to correct a few things just so that councillors understand. We talk about risks, and we talk about that the staff have evaluated the risks. The staff evaluated the risks when we had the first lot of funding came, and we were reassured that we could always opt out. We were reassured that. Many of us asked that question, and we're all very conscious that we all asked that question. And we all said, are we sure we can opt out? And we were told regularly, yes, you can still opt out. And within months, that was taken away from us. Risk? The risk is still there. I also note that it comes down to interpretation, as some people have pointed out. Interpretation is written what is in the document that you're signing. Very clear. Item 2.4 says the recipient must use all reasonable endeavours to ensure that the permitted funding activities are completed by the end date. Very clear. 2.10 states, as we've all talked about it, the recipient must not at any time do anything that could reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the reputation, good standing or goodwill of DIA or the New Zealand government.
4.6. At any time, DIA may recover the amount of any funding that has been spent or used other than in accordance with this agreement, or not applied to eligible costs by the end date, together with interest on all such amounts calculated at 10% per annum from the date of the misspending to the date the money is repaid. That is a document we are signing, a contractual document. But as a council, we're not allowed to make a change to that document, to say we don't agree with it. When you buy a house, Councillor Cooper, when you buy a house, you have the opportunity to change the clause on it, and both parties sign that to rectify it's correct. We have been told by our council staff that that is not possible. We must rely on a letter being sent to say you still have to sign the contract as it is, but you can ignore that section because that's not going to affect what you're doing. Again, Your Worship and councillors, I make it very clear, morally, we have made a stand. We need to make the stand and keep firm to it.
Right to replace the head, I'll put the motion.
Division, please.
Division.
I'll support for division. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillors Golightly, Cockerill, Barton, Holtz and Reid.
Who's against?
Councillors Cuckworth, Deeming, Benny, Cooper, Peters, Connor, Innes, and Her Worship the Mayor.
Was lost. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Do you want me to read out the recommendation or the motion that I'm moving?
I think just read out 2 and 3.
All right. So one is what has been read out by Councillor Coccarello. 2 is approves an application to the Three Waters Reform Better Off Support Package Tranche 1 funding of up to 9.48 million, excluding GST, on the terms and conditions set out by the Department of Internal Affairs in the Three Waters Reform Better Off Package Tranche 1 funding agreement. And 3, instruct staff to provide suitable projects, programs or initiatives for the Three Waters Better Off Grant Tranche 1 funding proposal to the maximum value of 9.48 million, excluding GST, and to continue to negotiate the Three Waters Reform Better Off Package Tranche 1 funding agreement between Council and the Department of Internal Affairs for Council approval. Thank you.
So it's been moved, Councillor Benny is seconded.
Thank you.
Councillor Innes.
A lot has been said in response to Councillor Coccarello's motion. What I would say is that we stand on high ground. We stand on high ground because as a community, we have said we wanted our waters at a level that we're able to provide for recreation and seafood within our harbour. The community marched in the streets in terms of that. We listened to them. And what we did was that we looked at wastewater, and we looked at providing for wastewater. We also looked for potable water as well and providing that. I look at the ward that I represent in Whangarei Heads on the shores of the harbour, and the fact that we committed substantial funding towards ensuring that we had wastewater facilities that ensured the quality of our harbour. And that's incredibly appreciated by our community. So when I look at the position we have as a council, it's one that it's different from others. And we have a government that's having to actually look at the wider perspective of New Zealand and the fact that a lot of councils have not placed priority in terms of its waters. And I really refer to the two waters. I refer to wastewater and potable water. I think we have a challenge with stormwater, and I think that challenge in part is going to be met by the review of the RMA and the Natural and Built Environment Act and the integration of wastewater into our development. So I strongly support council, and I did, in terms of our legal position. Because we're in a high position in terms of the services we provide, we would rather hold on to our three waters as a preference, but we're in a privileged situation compared to others. So we have to reform, and we recognise now that we look towards a level of compensation. And I don't think the tranches that we have in front of us will do justice to the commitment that we've made as a community towards three waters financially. And I look towards hopefully further discussions with central government on community well-being. So what we have in front of us here in the motion is one that we look towards 9.48 million. If I have any advice to start, it's one to give it urgency. It's one to ensure that we do have those projects. We do have those discussions, Councillor Hoss, in terms of Māori and our standing committee. And I look forward really to the projects that will evolve. I will not be on council at that stage, but I look forward to that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. Further debate. Councillor Martin.
It's about time I spoke, I suppose. We're in the position in Whangarei because of the sterling work that's been done by the staff and councils over the years. When we move forward, this is the thin edge of the wedge. We get tranche one and we're going to start collecting the money, and then we're going to go into tranche two. We're already hooked in, according to this document, to the three waters. From then on, nobody in this district is going to have much say. Two people from Whangarei are going to be represented. That's what we're told at the moment. So we're not going to be in control of our own destiny. We're not going to be doing our own things. It's going to be controlled externally from a central person. They're going to bring in rules and regulations that we're going to have to comply with. Who do we think is going to pay for that? Do you think somebody else is going to pay for it from somewhere else in the country? Anything that happens, we're going to be involved in it. What happens in Auckland, Far North, anywhere else. Ours is all up to spec now, but under the new system, everybody's going to be there. How much is that going to cost us? And we talked about it yesterday when we had the our lending authority here. Is it going to be affordable? The rules and regulations and the expectations that an external group have. We've always been able to keep our rates by taking bite-sized bits of things. If they decide that we're going to do some massive stuff with our stormwater or anything, we're going to have to do it. And we won't have the control to say we can't afford it or we can't do it. And I believe that in 10 years' time, people will look back at this decision and say, I cannot believe that they could not look to the future and see what was going to happen when they had central control. So I won't be supporting this.
I just want to reiterate what I said under the first discussion, that I hope we stick with the aims of this money. And I also would like to encourage staff to seek partnerships in doing some of those projects when they consider it, because for two reasons. One, because it's good involving the community, but secondly, because you get more bang for your buck, and it is more attractive to central government.
Yes, I just want to reinforce some of the comments Councillor Martin made. Collectively, Councillor Martin and I have been chairs of Works Committee or infrastructure for probably 24 years. And we know what's happened to get that infrastructure in place and the number of public meetings we've had to front. And the insistence of a lot of ratepayers that we can, what are you doing this for? But we held strong, we delivered what we said we're going to do, and now everyone's saying Whangarei Council has done a really good job as far as wastewater and water infrastructure. But I want to go back to this thing, this portrayal that big is always beautiful. The government is pushing centralised. Big is always beautiful. Well, look around the main cities, what led to stream water reform? It's mainly come from the capital, from Wellington, with bloody pipes, with sewage running into the harbour, and followed just previously that we had the Auckland Council doing the same. There's an example, and Telford. So there you go. We've already got a major problem in the cities, they can't fix it, so let's pay a whole lot of money in it, and let's see whether they can fix it. I would possibly could entertain the idea if the grant money was specific to delivering water infrastructure. Now to give an open blank check to the communities, I feel is a disservice to the whole intention of the Three Waters campaign. If they were going to reform, surely you invest all this money they're talking about, this 9.48 million, into improving our water systems, either flood water, storm water, wastewater, whatever. But to say councils can use it for whatever they like. Well, it's the government's responsibility to fund housing at the moment. We aren't in the field. We're working to see what we can do. But at the moment, it's the government's responsibility. It's a big fail there. So let's give an election bribe to all the councils and say, okay guys, here's a whole lot of money, do what you like with it. But is that so far away from the intent? The intent is to improve Three Waters. How can a government do that? It's so misleading, and I think Councillor Dean has summed it up pretty good. How can you trust something with a moving target all the time? So I'm going to continue to oppose it on the sense that big isn't always beautiful, and as Councillor Martin just said, you wait to see, if you're part of the Auckland outfit, how much money is invested in Auckland. But we will not see very much at all. Thank you.
Thank you. This is going to seem rather odd, but I am going to change my view because I was 50-50 one way or the other. I see both arguments, but what I actually see is that this money is going to be there for all sorts of social programs, everything not connected with basic infrastructure, and I don't think that's the correct use of the money. So accordingly, I'm voting against it.
That's a couple. Thank you, Worship. Just in terms of what Councillor Holst was saying, I think it's really important that we understand that this is not compensation for the Three Waters. If this money was compensation for Three Waters reform, I don't think you'd have any councillors voting for it. This money signals, I think, where the future of local government is going to lie as the Three Waters reform kicks in, as resource management changes kick in, as the future of local government reform comes through its quiet, slow, sneaky, quite slow process to the report in September. But it is signalling where the future of local government is going to lie. And I think it's really interesting that they have, as Councillor Peters pointed out, identified the three areas: climate change adaptation area, housing development and growth, not just providing houses, but other things as well, and local place making and improvements in community wellbeing. So I just did want to just sort of answer my dear comrade Councillor Holst's comments about it being sort of why I've been spending it on water assets, because I think, just coming back, if it had been about water assets, we wouldn't be supporting it. And it is actually about where we wanted to go in the future, and I think it's a really good opportunity to look at some creative projects that we've had around for a while, and also some new projects in terms of going forward for the local government.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been sitting, listening and taking it all in. And I read the document, and there's a number of points in there that are, to me, a noose. And if we vote for this, we're just tightening that noose. It would be lovely to have $9.5 million to throw around our community. But when you look to the future, it would be very nice to have social housing. But if we haven't got the money to fix the sewage, where have we really gone? So I just would like to urge those that are for this to think about how they'd like to be remembered in the future. When someone has an issue due to us making the wrong decision today.
Any further debate? Councillor Brown.
Yes, Your Worship. I think my fellow councillors have also highlighted the issues and the concerns as I did previously. One of the things I just want to read out is about the background, and I think we need to, Councillor Innes, I think you need to read the background there, because it actually talks about the Crown entered into a heads of agreement with New Zealand local government. That's LGNZ. Not us. LGNZ. So LGNZ turned around and came up with these ideas with central government about what they thought was better off. And if you read what they say was better off, it actually turns around and says a $2 billion package which supports the goals of 3 waters reforms by supporting local government to invest in the well-being of their communities in a manner that meets the priorities of both the central and local government and is consistent with the agreed criteria for such investment set out in the heads of agreement. We don't have any access to the heads of agreement. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. We do have access to it. We have seen it. But we didn't actually have a say in it. And as a council, which has stood firm about our 3 water stance, I'm amazed that I have councillors in here who insist to trust a government which pulls the rug underneath them. I'm amazed. Because these same councillors said to me, oh no, they wouldn't do that. They did that in the first tranche. And I was there trusting them. So I am amazed if any councillors are going to vote for this, because they are going to go against what our public, our residents actually want.
I don't think there's anything that I can say will change your minds. So I'll go to the right one.
Thank you, Worship. I just acknowledge Councillor Cutforth's comments. I really can't add any further to that other than this is looking at going forward. And I think when we had a look at the 9.48 million and the criteria is very much in that vein. So I'll leave it at that. Your Worship, I won't respond to some of the other comments. Thank you.
Put that motion, those in favour.
Division.
Councillor is called for division, those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillors Cutforth, Benny, Cooper, Peters, Connor, Innes, and Her Worship the Mayor.
Those against.
Councillors Golightly, Deeming, Cockerwillow, Martin, Holtz, and Reid.
It's carried. Tarangi Kotahiro Rima Toma. page 150, item 7.8. Oh, yeah, looking at the time. Now is probably a very good time to take a break. Sorry, team, you're actually so we'll take a 15-minute break. So we'll be, well, let's make it a 14-minute break. We'll be back at 11:10, please. Councillor Peters.
Don't be so hard on her. She's got some dispensations, she can't move that.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Inappropriate discussion about.
Who's the same as Peters?
Item 7.8, North Car easement Kōtata on Tārangi Kōtaki Road in Matakoma. Recommendations on page 150. Do I want to move into the recommendations? I'll move. Councillor Dean is moving. Councillor Collins is seconding. Councillor Dean, would you like to read out your motion?
Okay. That the council, pursuant to section 48 of the Reserves Act 1977, resolves that public notice of the application is not required in accordance with section 48 of 3 of the Act. 2. Approves the application by North Car Limited for easement rights over lot 3, DP 96485, detailed in the attached deed of agreement. And 3. Authorises the Chief Executive to finalise and execute the easement plan and instruments in agreement with the applicant. With an S after it in case there is applicants. So, and I obviously, since I've, do we have a second?
Yes, we do.
Oh, excellent. In that case, I totally support the agreement because it's in the best interests of the community in general and the residents in that area in particular.
Councillor Dean, nothing further. I will put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against.
Now,
7.9, page 178, the Civic Centre update for June 2022. Recommendation on page 178. Do I have to move it to the recommendation? Councillor Green, Councillor Dean is seconding. Councillor Cuthbert, would you like to make a motion?
That the council approves an extension of the budget for the construction and fit out of the new civic centre at 9 West Ave to $59 million, with the budget increase reflected in the 22-23 annual plan. Thank you, Worship. So as councillors will know, we've been on this project for some time. In fact, for some years before we were on this project, we were talking about this project and looking at different options and going around the tracks with various locations. So it took quite a while to actually, for the poor staff, get a decision out of council about where we wanted to be. And at the time, when we actually made a decision, we had a project budget of around 38 million, and then this council decided to extend the project and therefore the budget because of the extended scope to include NTA in the actual build. And since that time, we've let the contract, we've been working away, and we've been hit by a range of different factors, including, as people, I don't need to repeat all this for people know, COVID, supply chain disruptions, a range of other factors which have made the project really challenging. But I have to say, as one of the two councillors on the oversight group, I've been incredibly impressed by the work that staff and the contracts have done to keep costs pared down as much as possible to the minimum without compromising on the quality of a building that is going to set us up for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So while we are looking at extending the budget to account for the costs that have happened in particularly the last year, really. I think we can all be confident that we're going to end up with a facility that is going to suit this community and this council and this city into the future, and also will be the precursor for a whole lot of other work that will happen in this general area. I think that will really revitalise this part of the town. So I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to respond later and leave it for some discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. I just have a couple of questions before we open up for debate. Mainly around the financials. We're about to finalise our annual plan as from next week. And I just wanted to confirm that should this be approved today, that the project costs are included in the annual plan for that financial year, and that we have sufficient budget to be contained within our financial parameters that we've set.
Yeah, I confirm we prepared the plan on postal that's been included, so we have provision to wind it back if it's not.
Thank you. And the other question that I had was in the recommendation that it is for the construction and fit out. So just to confirm that the total price, it does include the fit out for the building. Excellent, thank you. Those are my questions. So I like that.
So we can hear the answer there. It does not include that.
It does. It does. It's in the recommendation, Councillor Holmes, in the motion. Any debate? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Worship, and it's not unusual I'll come up and try and speak to this one. This has come about by a notice of motion way back in March when Councillor Cooper brought a notice of motion, but I seconded it. It's mainly trying to get some transparency around the job. It wasn't about the content, it's more about letting our ratepayers know what we're doing with their funds. So since then I've had some meetings with our new CE, and most congratulated about how swiftly you got this on the agenda item in front of the public, so thank you for that, Simon. But the other point is, as we go through, we can't do too much about the spend today. But as said, there's probably some lessons learned. And number one is, this agenda item specifies the build cost on the building. There's a whole project cost that includes all the other things, like the bridge across the stream, the water main replacement outside of the Rust Dam. So the project cost is much larger than the build cost. And that is going to come to us shortly. So probably next month's meeting, we'll get the project cost. And that's what we've been saying all the time. Now, how big is this beast that we're building next door? Because it's add-on costs all the time. So I've been disappointed in my own performance on this. I felt that I should have started a bit early trying to get facts and figures out in front of our public. I'm disappointed in the fact that we started with a project that was 38 million at last election, and I went out campaigning it. I've got documents that I went out in the public with that say I'm doing everything to hold the cost of this building. Then council added another 10 million to 48 million that council voted on. But since that time, we have held most of our conversations in workshops and briefings where the public have been excluded. And I do not think that is a fair way to do things. So I'm not going to speak too much more, other than there are other ways to do it, and we have got some other building jobs on the horizon. And I'd like to think there's some lessons we should learn from this exercise. And there's no way that we should be taking the COVID situation, the lack of materials as an excuse to add costs all the time. I know it impacts, but there are ways around it. And I want us to explore those ways and make sure our dollar, we're getting 99.9% of the dollar invested in the right areas and no increase in costs and increasing costs. It's just so easy for councils to actually creep. And I think that's what we've got to signal to our ratepayers. We're going to stop the creep and escalation of cost. And the other thing is, seeing council just voted for the Three Waters 9.48 million, maybe this is a good investment to cover the increased cost instead of putting a scattergun approach that no one actually appreciates. Thank you.
I will finally meet the criteria. Councillors, any further debate? Councillor Reid.
Just one comment in the line of transparency, that the $10 million jump was covered off in a 3,000 square metre increase in the size of the building, if I'm not wrong.
The original increase in scope is correct, yes.
Yeah.
I don't actually wish to speak at the moment, but could I ask Your Worship that our project leader could be invited to explain how the increases happened and what, in the interests of people that don't have an agenda sitting in front of them but could well be listening, and how they were addressed.
think we come to the
Thank you, Your Worship. There's been a number of things that have happened since the project started. I think in any construction project, you always have a contingency allowance to allow for things which typically happen between the design stage and the actual construction stage. Taking the current situation aside, we always have contingency around 5% in there. There's further contingency on things that change through the life of the project as well, things which are undiscovered and unknown until they're discovered. Example being, in this project, we did a pre-demolition survey of the RSA building to identify all asbestos right down within the switchboards within the bowling pub pavilion. Did the demolition to find out that when some renovations were done way back in the day, and they put the floor in, they simply took the floor up, demolished the ceiling and dropped all the asbestos filled with fibrillite under the foundations and covered up again. So we didn't discover that until we started doing demolition at $100,000 bang. So those things happen in any sort of project. You're allowed for that as well. So that's been happening, and then of course COVID came along. So things as simple as a lockdown leads to extension of time in the contract, and there are daily penalty rates on both sides here. So every day of delay to the completion date due to factors outside the contractor's control, there's a day rate of, I think, 5,986, which they get, plus the cost of the equipment, which is stranded. So the first lockdown we had after 2 days in the project, 2 days, 2 weeks, from which it's been a while ago now, lasted a month. That didn't have a major impact on physical works because we're in the design stage, but it added that time to the contract. Because the contractor's assets tie up, that's a penalty you pay. Later on, the lockdowns in Auckland, and we had the team stranded there, and we had scaffolding that was partway through our floors being poured. And so all the props were stranded there for weeks as well. So we had to pay for those costs, that's standard. On the other side, once we get past the agreed completion date of the project, there's a fee which the contractor pays twice a day, and that's more like $11,000 a day. And that's what kicks on their side. So we bear the risk of those delays to start with, but after the agreed date that it should be done, the contractor has to pay penalties on that. That's a standard contract. So we're not at the point yet. We hope we don't get there. But that's cost us, I think, it's in the paper, over $500,000 just through those direct impacts of COVID. The supply chain logistics have been horrific for anyone doing building at the moment. They come across in many, many different ways. For example, we have components for which are New Zealand made, which it turns out are New Zealand assembled from components sourced all over the world. We've had factories in China locked down for over 6 months now, with no sign of when they're coming out of lockdown. Essential equipment which we can't get yet to go into the component we made here. That will cause a delay. We would need to actually substitute products for that to avoid those situations. We can't do it in every one of them. We've had the doors behind me for the chambers, the large doors there. We have in the chambers there are 2 suppliers available to us. We went with what we thought was the best and cheapest for the project. Thus it's gone into liquidation, which is with one supplier who the whole market has had to go to. Its instant cost $75,000 out of their control. These can be happening on a daily basis. Now, some things we can control. For example, the preferred product for the exposed ceilings was no longer available, so we went to an alternative. And we managed to cure something, managed to save some money by we're cutting those because the panel side dimensions were different, so we had to cut them. But then you find out the original product had painted edges and are exposed, the new one doesn't. So do you paint these edges to get the same effect you had started with? That was $60,000 to do more. The answer is no, we don't. So some things we can, we have choices, we can make some savings, some we just got to suck it up. And that's been the way all the way through this. So look, I've felt there's been headwinds since I started working on this in 2006. they'll become 24/8 and 9 on the Beaufort scale. Since we actually started construction, it's been tough, but the more we can, we'll keep it all we can, but there's a lot outside our control.
Thank you, and I would like to speak now, thank you. And I quite liked Alan's analogy there of headwinds, because I have to say that as the liaison peer on this project, Trish and I feel as though we've been hitting headwinds all the way along. And I noticed Alan didn't mention the quantity surveying in particular, and I do need to be very careful how that's mentioned now, but we did try to alert councillors outside the public arena of the difficulties that were there. We picked up on the difficulties that Alan was having very early in the project and raised that with him. And I have to say that the way that has been addressed and taking BDO on board has been a major strategic stroke in actually bringing this project to a satisfactory conclusion. While it's never satisfactory to have the budget having to increase, I think without BDO on board, we would have had considerably more trouble than we have. And we haven't, it's so difficult with a project like this to figure out what you can say in a public arena without winding up either personally or council-wide in a court situation, because it's so easy to drop a name in an arena that can then be questioned. So it's been quite difficult to keep councillors as informed as we possibly could, while not overstepping the mark when it comes to possibly making criticisms. But I do want to say that I think Alan and his project team and Eddie have done a masterful job in negotiating the way through all of the challenges that have come up. I think Alan has already in the past described design and build as compared with the way this project was carried out. And I strongly suspect if we'd gone with design and build in the first place, there's every chance that that player probably wouldn't still be in the arena, because there's so many different aspects that they would have been wearing that this project team together have managed to mediate between themselves. And I mean, we've been privileged sitting there in the meetings once a month, listening to their back and flow, and there's some pretty robust discussions, I have to say, particularly led by Robin, who we have all listened to. She came in and spoke, and I think we were all quite impressed with her ability. And I've been quite impressed with her stoic way of standing up to challenges that she's had from other areas to say this is not going to happen, and doing her damnedest to keep within the budget. So yeah, Alan and his headwinds, I mean, I can only say well done, Alan, and Eddie, you've negotiated those headwinds super well.
Just a question, Your Worship. Councillor Holst referred to a notice of motion the other day, today, 2 months ago. And that notice of motion had two parts. It was to sort of be public about what the building's costing us and to update the budget at that time. Now, obviously the cost of the building at the time, the expected cost was updated, but not the budget. That failed, that motion failed. And now it's being put in that we update the budget, and I just wonder what has changed that people now feel confident having a budget when they didn't before.
My recollection at the timing of the notice of motion was that it was premature because we hadn't yet had the analysis from BBD for the increases, and we didn't want to have to agree to an increase which hadn't been determined. I think we're much better to get this close to knowing what the final cost will be, and today's a better day to be making that sort of decision. That's my recollection of it.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
I just want to make sure I understood that. So I guess what you're saying then is that We didn't, we were frightened we would have to come back and ask for an increase at that point, so you didn't want to put a figure on it, is that right?
You may recollect better than
Yes, we should, at that time, there was still a number of significant procurement packages still waiting to go to market. We had no certainty as to where they would land.
Okay, so I guess we're now quite certain that this figure will be that figure.
No, I can't give that certainty or guarantee because there's still so many things going on in the market which are outside our control.
Okay.
There, for example, there are components we need to go into the lifts, which are stuck in China. And we can't get those in time, that's what we manufacture, we can't quite get the building can't open. That will lead to further cost under the contract. So I can't guarantee those things. The budget we've got now is based on our best forecast. It includes some additional contingency which will hopefully cover that. That's the best professional advice we've got. It can only be cast at time guarantee. No.
And I totally respect that. And I guess I'm trying to be consistent. We didn't accept the budget before because we didn't know what it was going to cost and there were some unknowns. Now we want to accept the budget and there's still unknowns and I don't quite know what's changed. There's unknowns.
Okay, through this year we've now gone through to, I think it's 99.6% of trade procured. That's the key difference.
So there's a blowout or small. Okay, thank you.
We also today need to confirm the budget that will go into the annual plan for the project. And we've got better information today than we had those months ago. Councillor Cockerill.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question's more, and I'm quite conscious that this item has got everything listed here, Your Worship. So I'm just quite conscious, is it wise to have the actual contingencies listed there? Because in most contracts that I've ever dealt with, you don't generally list the contingencies.
Through the chair, look, I've been torn right through this project between your desire to know everything, and full transparency and holding commercial confidences. I've got nowhere to go here to make you all happy.
I think you're in the right place.
So my follow-up question then, Chair, is I do hope the staff will still try to make everything possibly cheaper if they possibly can, and are still aiming to have efficiencies if they can find them. So I would like that reassurance, please.
The track record of the team, the project team speaks for itself today. So I know we've got that assurance.
I would like that assurance.
Through the chair, you absolutely have my assurance. We're doing everything we can to contain costs until the project's completed. I have a meeting scheduled for early the week after next with all the key players to go through the latest forecasts to identify further areas of saving. We've got the architect, the main contractor, two of their key staff, the quality surveyor and the project management team all are okay to do this. We're doing this on a daily basis to try to do this.
Just a question. Firstly, I am happy with the transparency of this, and I think it's required. The page 179, halfway down, talks about the revised forecast of $54 million there, and includes landscaping. Councillor Holst talks about the total project cost. When will we be getting that total project cost, and is that included in the annual plan?
Through the chair, the use of total project cost is quite a subjective one. We do plan to bring a paper back showing all the work around the whole area, which is different frame lines than the LTP. We could do that early in July.
So recall we also made decisions on increasing budget to landscaping, which also has gone to annual planning processes. There's been a number of decision points along the way, but Simon's going to add to that.
Yes, we'll be bringing a paper to you that looks at the precinct costs.
Yep.
So these are projects in and around the civic centre. Some of them are brought forward and associated with the civic centre, some are not, but they're within the overall precinct area, such as Rivers Lane Bridge. So I intend to package up all of that, so it's in one place, and so you can see all of that.
Cool. And I think that's important because I remember we talked about landscaping and we've approved part one of the landscaping, but I understand there's two other parts to come, which I think is clearly part of this project rather than the precinct, and plus other things around it. So I just think for transparency wise, it would be really good as soon as possible to have the costs associated with the building.
We add in the tunnel shed path and the, we stop. But yeah, I agree that, it will be good to have all the information.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thank you very much to all the staff that have done so much effort behind this and given as much detail, and to the two council lawyers who have been, as much as they possibly can, providing us with details too. This project it's a large cost, it's a huge cost, and to your average person, looking at the cost, it's immense. However, on kind of a district size type of thing, it is a large project, but at the same time, it's there to support the whole district. I'll go into bits and details, but a couple of the points I just want to say is, I'm really glad that so much of the building materials have started off, at least, being low maintenance, have been color steady instead of having to be painted over, protected, items really. And the costs over the long term have actually been accounted for rather than having to be replaced a lot sooner and quicker. The environmental stuff, I believe we have solar panels on the roof that will be providing power, and there's tanks and water and things. And the civic space for the public within the building is fantastic. It's supporting Hapu and supporting groups that will be able to come in, that will be so much easier to, rather than go through a rabbit warren to get to the council chamber, they can walk straight through the building to the end of it to actually find what's being decided for them. One of the biggest things that I keep kind of being disgusted about with business in kind of general is the race to the bottom. The cheapest prices, and next thing you know, you got cost cutting everywhere else, which then you got to cut costs elsewhere too. But when you want to have a good quality project or something, you need to have good quality materials or good quality things that will stand the test of time. The other big thing is, especially coming in from a laboring or a retail type of position, you really need management or those people above supporting the staff to do the best that they can possibly do. You support your staff, and then they can go and flourish, and the benefits will come back. The negative comments that you get from the public saying, oh, you're not fixing the roads, there's this, that, and the other, will always be there. But if you support the staff to be efficient in their own time or communication-wise, it will actually flow on into those spaces as well. That also is a testament to the working from via Zoom or Teams or whatever, and the benefits that provides, which we will be able to work within the new building. But also, you always hear comments, especially at the just kind of coming out of lockdown. Oh, it's great to be back in the building. It's great to be back in the building. Or I'm going on holiday, and everybody's going on holidays. It's not stopped. It's actually kind of probably bigger people wanting to get back into those spaces and providing a space where people can do the job efficiently, whilst maybe working from home also, but also being in the building too, is fantastic. And yeah, the last point I'll just say as well is, especially you just have to look at what the district council actually provides. How many things that are there for use, but people don't see them. There's pipes under the ground, there's the rubbish facility who's got all the different encapsulatings to ensure that there's minimal runoff and whatnot, or none at all. And then there's a playground there, or there's a park there, or there's the superficial, but the ones that are visually right there. Yes, I've got a playground. Yes, I've got a beach to go to. I've got clean water to be able to drink. I have surge to be able to flush away. I have all sorts of electricity that's into the house. There's these things that we do take for granted, and the building, in a sense, is that where we're taking for granted because that's being provided with all that. But it's really great to see that whilst there is an area surrounding it, that is going to be the more in the public eye, direct use, the space that will be provided out, which won't be associated necessarily with the council, but it's a new public area too. So it's one of those things. It's a new whole public space, and it's a new thing that's being provided for the public. And I'm glad that the staff have done as much as they possibly can to keep the costs down within a volatile environment.
Any further debate? Oh, Councillor Peters,
and thank you very much for presenting this and for the work that you've done. I'd like you to consider, possibly not right away, but within the plan, to have an area or more where we could have something from the multicultural community displayed. I know that's in the plan at the moment, but that could be a combined application to some philanthropic people to actually get something so that they feel welcome too. So yeah, I don't think it's in the plan at the moment, is it?
Through the chair, we have some screens and children's bike stands front room between the Path Lab and the art here outside the civic centre, and we've sought input from the local cultural society to the design of those.
Cool. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that's in train already. Thank you.
Any further debate? Councillor Porter?
Thank you, Worship. Look, and I really want to take my hat off to the staff. I appreciate the hard work that they've done, Alan, and your team. I appreciate the hard work you've done to try and keep this to a budget and keep this. When this original motion came to us, when it first came, which we increased to 10 million, by 10 million, both myself and Councillor Holst were quite not comfortable about that. And I'm still not comfortable about increasing it again. I know that there's been costs incurred. I know that there's been COVID things. I realise all that, and I acknowledge the hard work the staff have done and the contractors have done to try and keep things to budget. So I acknowledge that. Personally, I'm still uncomfortable at the extra costs because that's something that when I have run projects and things like that, it's something I'm always very conscious of. I know, Alan, you are. I know you are. You know, finances is your thing, and you are very conscious of it. So I just, again, to worship, I say, the project's got to happen. It's happening at the moment. The staff are doing the best job about it. I'm still uncomfortable with it, with the extra costs.
Thank you, Worship. I'd really like to thank councillors for the attitude that people have shown here today, and also the respect I think that people have given Alan and the team in terms of the work that they've tried so hard to both satisfy councillors' desire for information and for detail, and at the same time be conscious of the issues around confidentiality and some of those issues that we have to deal with. But really thank councillors for the sort of constructive and positive approach people have taken today, because I do understand, dare I say it, it's election year, and it would be really easy to take pot shots at this, vanity project that's, running at this sort of cost and But it's not the time for politicking now with this project. It is a project I think that both this council, future councils and the community will be able to be really, really proud of. I think we do need to be careful when we talk about, as your worship mentioned, about the total project costs, and I accept that there are going to be other costs associated with the impact of this project that are not necessarily specifically about the actual project. And I guess an example might be if you looked at Tomato Apoi, and I wasn't here at the time, but I suspect that the cost of the roundabout did not come into the cost of the bridge, and it's a very similar sort of situation here, I think, with some of the costs that are associated.
Yep, you're right.
some of the costs that are related to this project but are not, and maybe are due to this project and are happening because of this project, maybe being brought forward or being reconsidered because of it, but are not actually part of the project. The other thing I wanted to do was just, I remember Councillor Reid saying that he, you know, to keep costs down, he was prepared to carry his own chair over there. Well, you know, I know that in terms of the costs, what we have been able to control, and there are a lot of things that we haven't been able to actually control. But one of the things is the furniture and fittings, and a lot of the attempt now to hold those costs is coming through in how we're looking at furniture and fittings. The other thing, just in terms of something Councillor Connop said, is the building has been future-proofed as much as we could do within realistic costs. But it will mean that things like maintenance costs in the future are going to be far more controlled, I guess, than they could have been if we'd not had that sort of real control and thinking about the lifespan of the building. I know there's been a lot of concern originally about the design and build aspect or not of this project, but I genuinely think in this environment that if we'd gone with that type of project, we'd probably end up with half of a concrete box there and the builder would have gone down the tube. So I think the approach we've taken and the very, very strong project management there's been by both staff and particularly, as Councillor Deming said, our quantity surveyor, Robin, I think that has been the best control we've had in the type of environment that this project's been built in. I just remind members of the public who might be listening that lots of people don't realise this, and I should say it at a couple of meetings, that we're paying over $1 million a year in rent at Walton Plaza. And people seem to think that we sort of just, you know, where are council staff? All informed north. Well, no, we can't put them all in. So, you know, we're going to be saving those sort of rental costs in the future and building a building that is going to be the centrepiece of a new precinct here with other facilities. I think it's going to do us proud in the future. And I do want to really acknowledge all credit to Alan and Eddie and other members of the council staff who have been part of it, but particularly those two, and the tightrope that Alan has had to walk with councillors in terms of too much detail and not enough detail. So, and thank you.
Councillor Forth, the motion has been heard. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against?
Yes.
Does the Commission vote against?
I have one against it too, please.
Carried. Page 216. It's Kaki Waru Ira Tuataki. Financial report for the 11 months ending the 31st of May 2022. Recommendation on page 216. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Seconded, Councillor Reid. Councillor Martin.
Well, just go through page by page, or no?
So any debate on this? Do we need to go page by page?
No.
Any questions or updates? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Page 228. Capital projects report for the 11 months ending 31st of May. So the capital projects report, we have a move and recommendation of the administration. Councillor Deming, secondary, Councillor Martin. Councillor Deming, anything you wish to?
No, there's nothing in particular I wish to say. Thank you.
Any debate? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillors, we do have some items in the public excluded, so we need a resolution to move. I'll move it. Councillor, those moved. Councillor Deming, seconded. Sorry, Councillor. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Craig, for your services for our live meeting. Appreciate that. And thank you, Susan, for your attendance on the agenda. Hopefully you've got loads of fabulous stories to bring.